Hi, everyone. I'm Cameron Woodward. I'm one of the co-founders here at Wrapbook, and welcome to On Production. Today, we have an awesome guest, Matt Bobbitt. We're really excited to dig in. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
That's awesome. I think we've got another slide here. Quick introduction. Again, I'm Cameron and Matt, and On Production is brought to you by Wrapbook. I am the co-founder at Wrapbook. I'm going to give a quick plug. We are an all-in-one solution for entertainment payroll. We build a seamless, smart, and secure platform to make production easy for people in the production business. And with that, Matt, thanks for being here, man. This is awesome. It's really a pleasure to meet you and to have you with all of these people with us today. I'm really curious. Can you just kick us off and let us know a little bit about your background as head of production at Picture North?
Yeah, so I joined the Picture North team in early 2021. I had previously line produced for them, and we just built a wonderful bond and a flow of knowledge, and we kind of knew instantly it was a fit. So when I joined the team, it was really kind of taking the next step for us. We had already, this company had already been founded and was working great since 2008. And we just wanted to push to that next level of production where, not just higher tiers of budget, but higher caliber of just pretty much presentation and how we were flowing with our crews and how we were implementing not only in our area of filming with the Midwest, but coastal regions and global regions. So I came in to really play a part in that.
That's super cool. We're going to dig a lot into Picture North and what you've helped build there with the team. But I'm curious, like before Picture North, what was your first foray into production? How did you become the producer that you are today?
I actually got started quite randomly. I had moved to Los Angeles and I had no more money after paying first and last month's rent, like almost everybody moves to LA. I walked past a sound stage where there was some art department building some flats. I grew up with a contractor for an uncle. And so I kind of called these guys out and said I could do it better. And they gave me a shot. They gave me some meals and then eventually hired me. After that, I moved through Grip Electric and then started ADing. And eventually I got to the point where I realized, ADing is a rough life. And so I had a producer friend get me into production managing and producing. And that was about 12 years ago. It was a pretty quick climb up, but I was actually able to work through all the ranks to understand how productions work.
That's really interesting. I don't know if I've met a lot of producers that have gone on that trajectory. Like many people pick their craft and they stick with it. Like for you, being a producer and then becoming a head of production, like what are the skills in you or like the talents that you feel most naturally gravitated towards that help you as a head of production, like specifically? It sounds like you've kind of been across the gamut. Like I'm curious what you think makes a great producer.
I think, obviously having knowledge of budgeting skills, scheduling skills, all the basic credos. But the real thing that I've always taken pride in is leading with an empathetic approach, always understanding that every single project, every different crew and production team, they all have different needs. They all function differently. So understanding their needs has been extremely important in my role, because if we don't understand who we're working with and we don't try to bring the best out of them, we can't bring the best out of ourselves or the project itself.
Totally. Super cool. Okay, here's a random one. Where's the most kind of unique place that production's taken you in your career?
Wow. You mean physically, location wise?
Yeah. I'm curious if you've been taken anywhere unique on the job.
Man, I'd say, one thing that we actually just recently are filming, we filmed some, we're actually going back next week, is getting to actually film on an Air Force base. I grew up as an Air Force brat. So, once I turned 18, I wasn't really allowed on base anymore, especially with 9/11 occurring, and getting to finally go back to a base was really cool. And it ended up being the base that my dad's 3 F-111s were retired at. So it was a really fun experience getting to go back there. But otherwise, I've traveled the entire country and filmed in most cities. And it's quite a journey. You learn a lot about different cultures, different cities. You try food everywhere. And that's been probably the best part about it, is just getting out there and trying some fun food.
That's super awesome. Well, let's dig into Picture North. You touched on this a little bit, but can you double click on it? I'm curious, like, how did you meet the Picture North crew? Like, how did this kind of production company emerge and gain so much prominence so quickly? I'm just curious to kind of hear your interaction with the business and then to talk about, the growth and the trajectory of the company.
Yeah, so Picture North was actually founded in 2008 by Martin Rodal, who at the time was working at an agency. And, the 2008, we all know, was a financial issue. So outsourcing to a lot of production companies from agency became kind of a difficult thing because the social media scene was also blossoming. So he had the advantage of being able to come in and start directing some of the content for them. And it's that point that he really realized his future. So he broke off from the agency and started his own world. And then once we got to, I think it was 2012, he really started expanding, bringing in new producers that were joining the team full time. And then in, what was it? I think it was 2016. That's when we really started bringing editorial staff. And the editorial staff is where we really define what the company is. There was already directors signed. We were shooting products, but then, our director, Martin, he's from Norway. So he has a very European style approach to everything. And one thing that had been lacking in the production community was directors shooting something, building creative, and then getting removed from the post-production element. And so his entire vision was to make sure our directors were still a part of the post-production process. So their creative and vision was really being built out and shown. And it's done a lot of wonders for our clients and our repeat business because they love that style of approach. It's something they don't really get often anymore. And we're dedicated to that. And I had the fortune of meeting this team. It's October 2020, I believe. I had actually been signed up to produce this spot for Infinity with a good friend of mine that I used to work with at Motor Trend. And he and I were just going to take it on all together, but it ended up being too much of a financial burden. So he reached out to some guys that he went to college with. One of them was Martin. And Martin stepped in and said, you know what? Yeah, let's take this on. And it was an extremely challenging project, not only logistically, but with heavy amounts of COVID. It's a 70-person crew shooting in LA during COVID. And, the production company and we tackled it very, very hard, and we came out quite successful on it. And after that, we just built a bond and kept in communications. And, eventually they called me up and said, hey, do you want to join in? And I said, absolutely.
That's awesome, man. So what was like the first things you did, like when you jumped in as HOP? Like what challenges were you tackling, and like how did you apply your production background to the business?
The first thing was paperwork, folder structures, the most boring stuff. I'm a stickler for guidelines and protocols, and even more so organization. Like, you can ask anyone who's ever worked for me. File naming convention is one of my biggest pet peeves. If you don't name it correctly, I can't find it. So that was something I spent a lot of time for building up with them, is how do we want to structure bringing on production and post teams so that everything is a smooth process and we're eliminating wasteful time. And that was something that it took us, a good 2-3 months to get in the rhythm of. But once we got there, we were shaving off, time that we needed with production teams on staff, time that the internal teams would have to take either cleaning things up or just like wasting energy across the board. So that was the first step for us. And then after that, we really started diving into how we're bonding as bidders together, how we're treating our clients together, how we're presenting ourselves during the bidding phase. And then both those production and bidding phase really started to marry. And that was one of our greatest success. I feel like it took a good 4 to 6 months for all of that stuff to click. But once it clicked, it was this easy moving, well-oiled machine.
That's awesome. I mean, I think you did poke on something that's interesting. My background, I was a producer, and, we had that experience many times of like setting up the production, executing, building beautiful footage, and then just passing it on to a post-production house. Good luck. It looks good. I'm curious. So you guys kind of added that component onto the business so you can kind of have this end-to-end solution for your clients. From my experience, the flow of information from the agency, the client, into the production company, within the company, to then out to clients or out into the world is really complex. Like, can you describe like the lay of the land and how you set it up for how you like information to flow from the crew to you, and then from like finished picture through post? Like, I don't know if that's a workflow that everyone is familiar with here or listening in, or maybe there's some interesting ideas that you guys are doing that's unique for the producer thinking about kind of their whole production life cycle.
Yeah, I think, communication is obviously one of the biggest factor. I mean, I don't know if you've ever heard the old term safety third, but the way I've always seen it is number one is food, number two is communication. And with those two, you already have safety. So from the start, we don't wait for a job to award. We jump on it. We're pre-booking casting directors, everybody across the board. And then when our producers finally come on with the job award, we've got a lot of it built up for them. And so we pass down a gigantic sense of information, whether it's documents, contacts, or anything like that. And we don't just give a project to a production team and then walk away. We are deeply involved with every single element, because it's not, it's not just about us maintaining a presence for our company and for our clients, but it's about the support that our production teams need. So the communication between the production teams and us have flowed very well. And because of the way we structure and set things up, it makes it a communication with the agency even easier. The agencies that we always have worked with they're fantastic communicators, and that's something we're very fortunate about. And we work with producers that are just as great of communicators. So when we're like relaying information down to crew, it's not like a quick phone call. It's a call, it's a text, and it's a follow-up with a massive email of listing of things. So everything is very clearly laid out. Now, while we're on set, obviously we all know things can change drastically once you get to set sometimes. It's not always how we want it to go. Sometimes we want to stick to the boards, but as these things change and progress, we're there with our clients and our agency, communicating about the logistics, the effects that it's going to have fiscally, as well as any creative changes. And one of the reasons that we want our directors to stay through is because the storyboards we start with might not be what we shot, but they have a vision that's progressing through, and they're talking to the agency creatives on set. So we like to keep that flow of information moving forward as we get into a post-production scenario, and they're dealing with back-end deliverables and marketing. And I think one of the reasons, even if we're not handling post-production, we still upfront let the agencies know we'd like our directors involved. It's something that it really helps the editors get a better base, because there's not a lot of turnaround time these days. Most of the projects you shoot, you got 3 weeks to get through everything and online. So having the director come in and sit through with the agency creatives during this process, it cuts the time in half. It saves money not only for production, but for agency and for the client. So that's like how we kind of approach communication. It's never ending. It's a full life cycle. And even once it's gone and it's out, we're not done talking. We keep connecting about how we're going to post this on social media. Is this going to go to an award scenario? How did the client react? What is their marketing results? These aren't things that we don't shoot and walk away. We're there for everything. And we're always going to keep coming back with questions on that. We check in with clients 4 years later on how the product went. Are we all still feeling good about it? And that's something I think that's been crucial. And I haven't seen in a lot of other companies that I've worked for.
Yeah, I mean, for you as the head of production, like you seem really bought into that model as well. Like you don't seem just fully disconnected from the outcome, but like you seem very invested in it while also helping to produce the content itself.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that's occurred in the last 20 years of production is production teams get hired on, directors get hired on, we shoot things, it goes to a post house. And honestly, the agencies and clients sometimes forget to send us the final links to the work. And so crew don't even see what they worked on, producers don't see it, and they're like, oh, wait, it's on TV now. It's like, okay, well, we could have shared that before. And so we're really about sharing this information and making sure that anyone who worked on this and was affected by this knows what they are getting out of it as well, and where the product finally ended up.
That's awesome. Jumping into just the logistics and operations of being the head of production, you touched on this a little bit, but can you speak to more of the challenges of growth and managing so many different projects for folks that haven't had a chance to see the breadth and the depth of your projects? It's a staggering amount of productions at extremely high quality. I'm curious how you do it and what the challenges of growth have been for all of you.
Well, I mean, I think right now most of the industry has been kind of affected by a lot of financial scares that are coming up. And that's something that's always been difficult. And what we're doing to manage these things is really staying on top of every form of dollar and going back to that communication structure. So those are two of the main elements, but I think organization and finding efficiencies and processes has been a big one. There's a lot of old processes that we're slowly fading out. Like, for instance, with Wrapbook, we're getting rid of paper time cards, and we're getting rid of this 2-day back and forth with paymasters. We're working more efficiently, and we're saving time across the board. So that reduces the amount of work and oversight that I'm going to need to do, because I can easily click on a button and see where my team's at. Now we have tons of software and platforms that make communication across the board super easy. Like with every single production we have going, we start a production Slack. So now we have 10 people that all need to communicate, and they're not wasting time on emails or individual texts. We're all there together. We're all getting answers as fast as we possibly can. And I think it's the only really way to manage so many different projects at one time, secularizing each one and then communicating consistently.
So I mean, obviously, like I'm very biased. I love Wrapbook, but who lives in your guys' Wrapbook instance? Like you guys have, so you're in there, who else is in there in terms of kind of facilitating the communication across all the projects?
I'd say the main two is myself and our head of finance, Jim Moore. We're very on top of that. Sometimes our executive producers will tap in and take a look, but we've built such a great system between Jim and I that we don't really need EPs or other people jumping in. We also work with a lot of very trusted production teams. And, I don't think I've even seen really one issue come through in any of their payroll. And we double and triple check everything before we fund our payroll. That's something that's really important for us, is like being on top of everything. Payroll especially, because once you send out a check, that check's pretty much out there,
Yeah.
But Jim and I are really good at functioning and diving in on that. And every once in a while you get an EP, but for the most part, it's just us.
When was the first time I don't want to have this conversation dominated by payroll, because I think what's really exciting is to talk about like just some of the other production operations you've innovated and pushed on. But, when was the first time you experienced like a paper-based payroll process in your career?
Just day one, like 16 or 17 years ago, when I had to fill it out. And then when I got into actual production work, when I was handling payroll, I think that was 2009. And the first time I got a stack as a production coordinator is a stack this thick of payroll from a 1-day shoot. And it had to get turned around that same night. It was a nightmare. I don't think I've ever gone through that much whiteout in my life.
Wild. So, okay. We've talked about payroll. We know that that's an inefficiency, but you guys are using like digital solutions like Wrapbook to like handle that. I'm curious, in your background, what other inefficiencies and wasted time had you seen in productions in the past, and how are you trying to like mitigate those things as like you guys are going and looking into the future of what, a production company looks like?
Yeah, I think with each project, we're finding more efficiencies. Like one of the great things that's come out of COVID is reducing the amount of need for in-person casting sessions. Like that was a real drag on time before. And now we do, depending on what the show is, we're able to do like self-tapes. And so we can review on our own time and select what we need to, and then callbacks can be in person. That was a big waste of time for production teams and for the directors and the agency creatives. So that's a good form of an efficiency. I think some of the other ones, like using anything on paper. Paper is just the biggest waste of time now. It's a waste of any ecosystem resources as well. So what we're doing right now is finding even more efficiencies. Wrapbook was a great start. Slack is a great start, but we're still diving in now to try to find other elements for PO processing and things to just make our finance department even faster. At this point in time, we've pretty much got all of our production systems, whether it's our pre-pro books, our financial documents, everything is easy to fill out. It's not like using an Excel doc. You don't have to just sit there, waste time. We're using sometimes tools like Google Sheets for fast communications and share information as well, but it's just all depending. And so each project has a different need, and we assess that at the beginning to see what we can do to find those efficiencies to make it easier.
That is interesting, like pivoting from back office operations. Can you describe, maybe you have a couple of projects that you've had your hands on that are just really sophisticated, like any examples of, you mentioned one with McDonald's. Can you describe this production? I'm curious.
Yeah, McDonald's was a big hitter. There's this new technology called Nerve that Luma AI had helped create, but it was at that point in time, it was only for an iPhone, and it's a mapping tool essentially, and no one had done a broadcast commercial with it. So we partnered up with this influencer, Karen X Cheng, who helped design this with Luma AI. And we told her story. We had, I believe it was about 2.5 weeks to reinvent the wheel. And it was one of those things while we were building the car while driving the car. It was intimidating. It was very hard to budget. In fact, none of our budgets in our bids even really lined up with what it ended up being, but because you couldn't tell, because it was so new. And so what we were able to do on this one, besides working, 14-hour days for 20 days straight, we partnered with not only Luma AI, we partnered with virtual tech camera companies. We were literally doing 3 to 4 camera tests. We were replacing footage across every single thing because we didn't have enough funds for art department. It turned into a really challenging production, but the payoff was just absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. And it was because we were able to take our needs and communicate it with other firms and say, we need your help. How can we help? How can we build this? How can we make this happen? And everyone, once you tell them you want to try something new, they want to get involved too. It's just about not having the fear of reaching out and saying, let's do this.
Who led that charge? Was it like the DP assigned, talking with the technology provider? Like, how did you guys navigate building that out? We'll have to share the link for everybody to see this spot.
Yeah, that was actually mostly going to be down to our director on that. That was Jose Norton. He's a VFX. He's already a VFX director, and he got really excited about this idea. And he's already deep in the communities with Luma AI and these other companies. So during the bidding phase, which was about 48 hours, he did the best research he could. And then he was up day and night, all through post. He edited this thing as well. So he was really leading the charge with our other EP, Neha Schultz. Neha was, just instrumental in calling 500 VFX people over and over and over, trying to get answers, trying to figure out what this would take. And this was after we'd already been awarded. There was no way around this. We actually ended up pulling someone who is just a master in VFX, who works at Meta. We stole him away for 2 weeks and had him take his vacation so that he could come back and help build this car while we were driving it. So it was pure partnerships across the board.
That's interesting. Has executing a production like that as a head of production enabled you to tell an interesting story to your clients about, doing these sophisticated types of projects? Like, having completed that project, has that kind of put you on a position to get more like it? Or how do you parlay that really sophisticated, challenging project into not only more expertise for the production company, but for how do you tell that story to a wider audience of agencies or customers, as you build all this knowledge? Well, now what do you do with it?
I think we built some VFX, a grandiose VFX knowledge out of it, but the bigger knowledge that we've been able to gain and kind of relay to our sales teams and our agency partners is that call us up front. We don't care. We will do work up front. You don't even have to give us a job. We're here to help you. And it doesn't matter what the challenge is. We're going to figure out a solution for you. And we've been doing that right now with a project for Jeep. We are literally, once again, building the car while we're driving it. And it's crazy. We've gone through 10 different iterations of creative approaches, some dropping things out of a plane, some building things that come up out of a boat. We're here to explore, to learn, and to work with our partners.
Do you usually use the same core group of folks at Picture North to solve these types of technical problems or production issues? Or, if you're shooting all over the US or even the world, how do you as head of production manage the burden of the burden of labor between, is it freelance coordinators and producers that you're working with to figure things out in different states? Is it what's kind of the makeup for you and kind of solving these sorts of problems at scale with multiple projects going on at once?
Yeah, I think the first step is always analyzing and understanding which producer that we've partnered with is going to be the best for the job. And so even before the job's awarded, we start chatting with them about what they think their needs are beyond what we've already assumed. But we don't even go into these processes without making a million calls. If we're shooting down in Alabama, I'm going ham. I'm calling everybody in Alabama. I'm getting everybody on hold right away because they're the only ones that can tell me. I can't go and say, hey, I want to throw a truck off a bridge and just fake an estimate. I have to call these people. I have to figure this out. And it's not just me doing this. My EPs are on the line too, our directors, make these calls. Our entire team just dives in. And thankfully, we have such wonderful producing partners that they're willing to jump in and help as well. Even if they're both on another job, they're always willing to contribute. And it really is just like a good marriage of people that really want to make something good and make it fast and make it on budget.
That's awesome. Now you're based in Denver. Where's the rest of the company based?
We're a little all over. We have one of our EPs is in Los Angeles. We have our post-production team is all in Chicago. And then one of our other EPs in Chicago. We have salespeople, Midwest, East Coast, and West Coast. And then one of our EPs and directors, he's got a spot in Chicago, but I don't know if you'll ever find him there. I'm pretty sure he's buried in the snow in Tahoe right now.
Nice. Has it always been that way, or was that a product of COVID kind of letting you all break off and be remote?
Before I joined the firm, it was just the one EP who was in Los Angeles. That was separate.
Yeah.
But once COVID started, that's when we brought in there's like 6 of us that got brought in full time. And so it's not really where are you located? It's you can be global. Don't miss your meetings. Don't miss your time. Be there for your client. Be there for your team. And so at this point in time, we're based in Chicago, but we're not done expanding. Right now, we're currently looking for offices to start up in LA as well. And eventually we'll move over to the East Coast. And then eventually we're going to get international offices as well. We're not done. We're going to keep going and going.
That's interesting. I think that leads really nicely into this next question, which is like a lot of questions came in asking about the economy and how it affects production companies, both like coastal production companies versus like Midwest-based production companies. I'm curious if you have any thoughts or comments on that.
Yeah, I think one of the, I know quite a few producers and friends at other production companies where some of their work has been slowing down, unfortunately. What we've been able to succeed with is mostly we have a great sales rep team. These people are amazing at outreach. It's not even about them waiting for leads to come in. They're always reaching out and contacting different agencies and letting them know about our capabilities. But our real success through these economic times has actually been our repeat business. We're not driven just to get a job. We're driven for a long-term partnerships. And that's where we have tons of repeat business. We are often just single bid on jobs. And that's where we're able to succeed is because we want to partner so well and be with these people through the beginning and the end. That's why we're willing to do all that work for free up front, even if they're not coming for us for the job, is because we're their partners. And that really shows when you're in an economic downturn, you can make yourself always be available and you can make yourself succeed as long as you're willing to always be there for the ones that were there for you. And so I think that's been our greatest success is our approach to not just getting a job, but to the long-standing relationships.
That's awesome. I'm really curious, what role does improvisation play in your role as head of production? Like you talk about the flow of information, good file naming systems, this building a really well-oiled machine, but you also have productions going on all over the place. Things are just happening. Like, I'm curious for you in your role, what things do you find yourself improvising on? And for a great head of production, like, what does that look like?
It's an interesting question. I think improvising wise, it's always just more creative solutions. You're always going to hit walls. You're going to hit budget issues, scheduling, logistics issues. We can keep all of our protocols in place and those exist. But once you get down to the meat and potatoes, if you can't come up with creative solutions and always be thinking about the next step and 3 different options, then you're not going to make it in. You're going to have a hard sell and it's going to show that you're not ready for the big leagues. And for us, we have directors that are very capable of working with the agency creatives and the client needs to help shift for whatever their budgetary concerns are and the logistic needs. And so for me on my end specifically, I rely a lot of these improvisations on my creative team. Our directors really help lead that charge. I can help shape what the numbers and logistics look like behind their different approaches, but I rely on them a lot. And they're fantastic. They're educated. They understand. Most of these have actually produced as well. So those guys make my life easy. And I'm there to support them. And that's where he improvises creatively.
Awesome. You were just mentioning something in relation to like your relationship with like your finance team. You mentioned this a little bit earlier. Can you kind of dig into that, like between the relationship of a head of production and finance at Picture North? Like, what makes a good partnership for both of you?
Uh, I mean, it started with communication. Once Jim was brought on full time, he and I sat down. We spent a lot of time going over what I already established as procedures and where he felt I needed to tighten up and where I felt finance could tighten up. And then once we started getting into that, it was a very quick and easy flow for us. We joked our first like call where we were kicking off a production together. He slacked me a little gif of Will Ferrell and what's his name from Step Brothers. And it was like that was like, we just kind of became best friends easy, and we tackle every situation. If something comes up with a production team where they didn't do something right, he checks in like, hey, what happened with this? Is this incorrect? Did they do this wrong? Or did we make sacrifices? And so we just try to keep that communication line open, say, hey, I'm spending $10,000 on something you didn't know, but I need it. And it's fine. But finance and production, they are a beautiful marriage. And if they don't coexist, then they're going to butt heads, and you're not going to get people paid quick enough. You're not going to get vendors that want to circle back. And so he's just instrumental. Finance is definitely one of the most instrumental parts of all production, because I think everyone on their production teams know people sometimes don't get paid on time. Vendors sometimes don't get paid on time. You need someone who's watching every dollar in and out of this company to make sure that every deadline is being met. And he's just been instrumental of doing that for us.
That's awesome. Well, Matt, I want to shift gears a little bit. Some of the awesome folks participating send in a bunch of questions, and I think they're super relevant to the question of how do you build, scale, grow, and manage as the head of production, like a business like Picture North. Here's a question here. It says, like, do you have any philosophy on like maintaining quality with growth? Like, how do you do that? Is it a function of budget? Is it the quality of the, like, how do you maintain that?
That's a really great question. I think one of the things that we're able to do to maintain our growth with quality, even when there's less and less budgets and less time frames, is never compromising. Even if we don't have enough money in the budget, we're going to use our connections and everything that we've built over the years with different vendors, and we're going to pull favors. We're never going to get a cheaper camera. We're never going to go down on lighting. We're never going to get people that are not up to snuff when it comes to our expectations for their job. And I think that's really known. We work hard at also choosing where we're going to film things. We shoot all over the country specifically so we can find the best value for the best dollar and find the best crew to make something happen. It's really important for us to always maintain our quality. We won't even consider things if they're not up to our standards. But most of the time, even if it's not up to our standards, we'll make it up to our standards, and we'll show them what they could really get. Our creative approach is always to be the best, but also to share the most and to build this relationship with their creative so they know that we can give them more for what they have.
In my experience of running a production company, like where that can be challenging is like sometimes a client comes to you with a very set idea of what this production needs to be, but then they don't have the resources to execute it. Like, have you all found a way, or do you build like a relationship in such a way where if a really creative team from an agency or a client is like, no, well, we want to like jump off of a cliff and like do freebasing and we've got a small budget, like, do you all have a relationship to say that's a great idea, but let's pivot it based off of the resources and the budget so we can get the quality? Or like, how do you navigate that trade-off? Like, is it just building a great relationship with them? Do you guys actually come back with new creative? I'm curious what that looks like.
Yeah, during the bidding phase and the initial creative discussions, we will take anything you've got and we're going to look at what's real. And maybe you do want to have somebody jump off a cliff. Well, great. One of our directors is actually a certified skydiver and a pilot. So we're going to get his input on it, whether he's been bid on the job or not. And we're going to start making calls across the entire country to see where we can do this safely, where there's good rigging crew. And we're going to get numbers before we say yes or no. We don't just jump in and tell you, no, we don't like that idea. We research everything. And then if there's an idea that might not work, we're not going to come and tell you no. We're going to come and say, hey, here's option A, B, and C that are creative alterations. What do you guys think? And at that point in time, that's when we just keep chatting it through. There's not a no out there. There's a what if. And that's how we've always approached everything. We're creative driven. So we don't believe in no. We believe in what if, and this is what we can do. And it's always been very well received. I think that when you have a company that will just tell you, no, that's not possible, you're just not doing yourself a good favor, nor are you doing your clients a good favor. There's always a solution. It's just, how do we get there together?
That's interesting. Is this on average something that happens every single job where you have to go through that iterative process, or have you found like a way where you've built a relationship where your clients just can expect like a response that they're okay with? Like, I'm curious the tension there between going through an iterative partnership as head of production with the clients on a budget and all the way through to production, or like what that relationship looks like.
Well, I mean, there's always going to be some challenging projects that come through, and we get a lot of them actually, especially in the last couple of years. But we still have those projects that come through that are, these are the boards we want. It's nice and easy. You've got the money for it. Great. And when we get those challenging projects, we dive in, but it's not every time. And that's something it is fortunate when you get those projects that are quick, easy, in and out, like here are the boards, shoot the boards, go home.
Yep. So, that's awesome. It sounds like also you were mentioning this a lot. You really you guys are at a life cycle, a stage in your business where like you really can compete based off of the work. And then like that drives a lot of interest in businesses to work with you all at Picture North, it sounds like.
Exactly. I mean, that's what we are about. We're about the content, we're about our creative, and we're about our work. And so we would prefer you came to us for that. We don't want you to just come to us because we can make a budget work. We are happy to take that job though, but we really want you to also be invested in our team and our creative approach. Because without that, if you're not invested in us, we're only going to be so good at investing in you, but we're always going to give you 100%. But I think people really drive themselves to Picture North because of our directors and our creative approach.
That's cool. So there's a question here from someone that says, in the changing climate of commercial production, challenged budgets, and brands wanting assets galore from each production, so different cuts, different photos, just assets, where is Picture North currently focusing its development efforts? Like, how do you all approach just like different deliverable requirements?
I mean, I think it's, project per project, but I think one of the first things we do during our bidding phase is establish, what do you actually need? What is the client's expectations and why? Because yes, we've got so many social media platforms where there's different aspect ratios, like you've got burned-in captions, SRT files, you have all of these aspects that are going to come out. But if we don't know up front, then we're going to run into back-end issues. We're not going to be able to plan and schedule our timing correctly. But thankfully, we've got, great clients and communication to the point where we know the questions to ask. So we know what we're getting into, and it's not as much of an issue. If you know what you're getting into, then you can manage all the other expectations. And sometimes we tell clients, hey, for what the money and the time you have, we can get you these things. But if you've got a little extra money here or there and you've got a little extra time, we can finish everything up. And we're just upfront with them, and we're always going to figure out a way to make something work. And one of the benefits for us is having internal post team. We can really do a lot more than other post houses because we're willing to take we're willing to take the time, and we're willing to sacrifice some of the line items so we can make sure our clients know that they're well-deserved and that we appreciate them, but that we're also there for them. And we're always going to give them what they need. But it's really just communication up front. That's for everything.
It seems like a big differentiation of Picture North is having so much post capacity in-house. For you as head of production, what's the split between your time on like physical live action productions and like principal photography productions versus the post house? Like, what's the breakout for you?
I mean, I think the bigger thing is up front, like once getting the job and communicating with our post-production supervisor, Stacy. She's obviously very hands-on when it comes to the post vendors, our timelines for our editors and availability. So she and I, from the start, we review creative, we review their timelines, we build out a calendar to see what's possible, who can work on it. And then thankfully, she's so amazing at her job that once we really get to post, I get to almost pass a lot of it over to her. and she'll start communications with our clients, keeping me in the loop as well as our executive producers. But it's more about lining things up, getting it to her, and then helping her push through when there's issues that come up with, deliverable timelines and budget stuff. That's when I'll jump back in and make sure we're communicating, we're on scope. Because that's, when you get to a post, sometimes that's where there's a lot of scope creep and something we monitor a lot. But thankfully, I've got a team where I'm not having to sit there and deal with all of it all the time.
This is a hard question, but I think it's a valuable question for people who are producers. I'm curious, like, over the years of your experience as being a head of production, how do you manage scope creep on projects? Different. Some go perfectly, some do not. Sometimes the more difficult projects actually turn out being some of the best work. At least that's been my experience. But I'm curious, like, tips, tricks, your experience on kind of dealing with scope creep and keeping projects on the rails.
I mean, the number one thing with scope creep, call it out instantly. We, when we submit a bid package, we have a very, very extensive cover letter that defines exactly what we're doing for the money provided and for the timeline. Alterations after that, there's a conversation like, is this an overage? Does this push our timeline? And we're never going to tell you no on a scope creep. It does happen, but we're always going to identify this to the agency and to our clients right away, call it out and say, hey, this is not within scope. Let's discuss options and how we can manage this, whether it's going to be a necessity or what it's going to take on top of what we've already been contracted for to make this happen for you. Scope creep, it's always going to be there. And you can see this in every single industry right now. It doesn't matter what it is. Everybody needs more. Everybody needs it for less, and everybody needs it right now. So if you're going to deal with something like that, go in with a positive attitude and just say, here's what we got. Here's what we need. How can we get there together?
That's awesome, man. Here's a really good question from somebody asking related, I'm sure, trying to figure out how to build up their own production company. What processes do you take to vet your clients, they ask. Could you offer some ways of finding clients that meet your threshold of budget ranges? I guess this is like, how do you decide who to work with? What's your criteria of figuring out if a brand's kind of concept is in line with your guys' kind of own editorial vision of what you produce?
I mean, we're pretty fortunate. We're at the place now where majority of the projects that come through us are through sales reps, and our sales reps know our directors and our content so well that when we're being given leads, the leads are already kind of like filtered through for us. Our sales reps they're fantastic. They line up meetings for us across the board with agencies all over the country, in the UK. Like they're very hands-on, but it's because they know our brand as well. But our brand isn't limited. Like, our entire trajectory right now is finding new creative directors and new creative editors to always partner with, so that we're constantly growing and we're not just hitting one different mark. We don't want to just be a comedy house. We don't want to be just a docu house. We want something that can be managed for all categories. Yeah. And so right now our sales reps have been crucial in this. When it comes to like vetting a client, they've kind of done some of this legwork for us. We will always get on the phone with them for initial little producer chat before we get deep into bidding. And, you can tell right away if there's going to be not such a great connection, but that always is like your gut feeling is not always right. Sometimes people have bad days. So we don't want to ever base it off of that. Everybody gets a chance. And that's kind of the way we see it. We see that there's always opportunity. There's always people to partner with. So why not take the time to get to know them and try to work with them? And, when it comes to the budget aspect on that, sometimes we're going to take a little bit of a hit because there's a new agency that we love their work, but they don't know us that well. They don't know our director yet. So they might have a smaller budget. And when that happens, we're going to work with you. We're going to figure it out, and we're going to show you what we're about so that you keep coming back to us after that.
That's cool. I mean, I feel like our conversation's been like really wide ranging, and that like, who picks a director, who manages the agency client, like sometimes depending on the scale of a production company, like those are different people in different roles. For you as the head of production, overseeing these projects, making sure that they're getting done, like bringing our conversation just to the craft of making the work. I'm really curious, Matt, like who are the types of roles or the types of people that you lean on the most to make sure that productions are successful? Like who on your team, how have you structured your team to make sure that productions are really happening effectively and getting shot?
I'd say that in the beginning stages, I lean heavily on our directors and our executive producers. as well as our agency partners. It's not just us, we're in it with them too. So we're all working hand in hand to get it going. And then once we're in the production phase, I really lean on our line producers, production managers, coordinators. It's a broad spectrum at that point because they're also now involved with communications with our agency. So the communication that we begin up front with the director, the EP, and the agency, it rolls over. And that's when we bring in a producer and a production manager, coordinator, so we can keep communicating together. It's kind of the biggest aspect is that there's not one person. We don't get a job awarded and then just give it off. We're there, period.
That's awesome. And then a really, really great question just came in somewhat related to this from Brooke. Thanks for the question, Brooke. She says, hi, Matt, what processes did you implement prior to bringing on a sales staff?
So that's a great question because it's for a lot of production companies that are just starting off, you really got to put yourself out there, and it can be kind of difficult. And we still do this even with salespeople. We reach out to agencies that we don't know. We find them on LinkedIn. We've just watched their work on iSpot, and then we touch base and say, hey, this is what we're currently offering. Can I take you to lunch or just hop on a Zoom one day? And we're willing to sit there and burn a string out of some different work and go sit at their office with them and their whole team and show them what we're capable of. You gotta put in time. You're gonna have to spend your own money, and you gotta not be afraid.
Absolutely. This is super awesome, Matt. Thank you so much for your insights. I have one last question, and then I'll tie this up. And I'm curious, piggybacking on that idea of the folks that you lean on, what is it that you look for in your coordinators or people that you give a high degree of trust to execute these productions? Are you going back to the same group of people over and over again? How often are you helping people kind of move up and into a coordinator role?
I think building people up is extremely valuable. And I think a lot of producers right now notice in the industry that in the last few years, a lot of people have been built up a lot where they've moved on, and some of the positions are harder to fill in the bottom. But I think what we look for is honesty and time and effort, because there's always going to be an instance, for instance, where there's a lot of work, and if you don't communicate us that you're in over your head or you need help, then that's a bad sign. But we give people a chance up front, and when we're finding new people to partner with, we do this all the time. Neha, one of our EPs, and I, we just look at different areas. We just start searching from line producers, and we reach out and say, hey, you want to hop on a Zoom? Ask them how they handle budgets, how they handle certain situations with clients. Are they very client facing? Are they logistics facing? So we try to get to know them before, and we always want to have new partners. Working with the same producers have proven very successful for us, but they're not always available because they're great producers. And you also sometimes, when you go to a small market, that producer that you've been trusting might not know it. So you're going to reach out to everybody to figure out, hey, who have you met down there that I should trust? So once again, it's a word of mouth industry, and we take a lot of our close partners, we take their word for gold, and we trust them, and it's always worked out for us.
That's awesome. Well, look, Matt, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, your experience, the amazing work of Picture North. It is a word of mouth business, and it is about sharing knowledge and helping each other just make amazing work. So thank you so much for your time. I'm super inspired by what you all have accomplished at Picture North, and we're so excited to support you all at Wrapbook. So thanks so much for your time.
No, thank you. We appreciate it.